All right, gang, so the last video we learned about major scales, minor scales, that includes the natural minor, harmonic minor, and melodic minor scales. Today we're going to talk about how they're all interconnected using a great tool and reference called the circle of fifths. So here we go. In the previous video, we talked about major scales, and here you see the scale you're familiar with, the C major scale, and its pattern of whole steps and half steps. In the previous video, I talked about the tonic, or the first step being the most important note, and the fifth step, or dominant, being the next most important note. If we put chords, that is every other note, on each of those, the tonic sounds like this, and the dominant sounds like this. You hear the dominant has an unresolved sound that wants to go back to the tonic, like this. So that means the dominant has the greatest pull towards the tonic. So what happens if we make a scale off of the dominant? So let's start at the fifth step, or the dominant of the C scale, which is G, here, and we'll go up whole steps by half steps. So we have G to A is a whole step, B is a whole step, C is a half step, D is a whole step, E is a whole step. Now we need another whole step, that's F sharp, and a half step to G. And there's your G major scale. Now you already know from music that you've been reading in the past that you don't normally see the accidentals throughout the whole music, but rather they occur just once on the left side of each line to indicate that all of those notes are adjusted. So here in the key of G major, your key signature would have one sharp, F sharp, at the left side of the line, and so that scale with a key signature would look like this. So now we're in the key of G, and G is now our tonic, and the tonic chord sounds like this. The dominant in the key of G, the fifth step of this scale, is D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's your dominant on D, and so the dominant chord will sound like this. So what would happen if we make a scale off of the dominant here, the D, and make a D major scale? That's what we have next. And in the same way as we did with G major, we can move all of the accidentals to the left side, and we get the key signature for the key of D major, which has an F sharp and a C sharp. So have you noticed the pattern that's starting to build up? In the key of C, there are no accidentals. Going to the dominant of C, there's one accidental, F sharp. Going to the dominant of G, there are two accidentals, F sharp and C sharp. And so if we continue this pattern, we end up with 3 sharps, 4 sharps, 5 sharps, 6, and 7, and then that switches to flats, and eventually we build one of every key, all 12 keys on the keyboard, and we call this the circle of fifths. Take a look at the orientation of the information in this circle. It resembles a clock face, with C at the top where 12 o'clock would be, and as we continue around clockwise, that is towards the right, we go to 1 sharp, the key of G, 2 sharps, the key of D, 3 sharps, the key of A, E, B, and at the bottom at 6 o'clock we have both 6 sharps and 6 flats, F sharp and G flat. On the piano keyboard, these are enharmonic pitches, and likewise the key signatures are also enharmonic. The circle continues around through D flat, A flat, E flat, B flat, F, and finally we arrive back to C. Each time you move from one key to the next, you're always going from tonic to dominant, going around clockwise. G is the dominant of C, D is the dominant of G, A is the dominant of D, and so on, and that connects this as one revolving circle. Note from the top, going around, we see a pattern of letters. C, G, D, A, E, B. You can think of B enharmonically as C flat, and we have C flat, G flat, D flat, A flat, E flat, and B flat. That F hanging out, F flat, would also be the same as E. So the circle repeats itself around with the same letter names in the same order, F, C, G, D, A, E, B. Now take a look at the way the key signatures build up the sharps going around the circle clockwise. The first sharp is F, the second is C, the third sharp added in the key of A is G, in the key of E we add D, in the key of B we add A, in the key of F sharp we add E sharp, and in the key of C sharp we add a B sharp. But what about the flats? Look at the way the flats are added. The first flat in the key of F is a B flat. In the key of B flat, we add a second flat, E flat. The third flat in the key of E flat is adding A flat. And then we add D flat and G flat, then C flat, and finally we would add F flat in the key of C flat. Do you notice the pattern? It's the same thing as the sharps, but in reverse order. Take a note at this order of letters, B, E, A, D, G, C, F, or F, C, G, D, A, E, B. This is the order that the flats and sharps occur in. Take a moment to look at the circle of fifths and the different key signatures here. The key signatures should always be oriented with the sharps or flats in the order that you see. Similar to the major keys, minor keys also build their key signatures in very much the same way. If we start with all natural, all white keys for a natural minor scale, we would end up with A minor. Add one sharp would be the dominant of A, and that would be E minor. Add another sharp, that would be the dominant of E, and that would be B minor. This continues all the way around the circle, and then we also see that these keys are related to one another like this. In this case, we have two letter names for the same key signature, the key of C major or the key of A minor. We say that these keys are relative key signatures. That is, they have the same key signature, although they start on a different note. Conversely, if we have the same letter names but different key signatures, for example, the key of C major and the key of C minor, those are called parallel keys. They start on the same note, but they have a different key signature. Be sure that you know the relationships between relative keys, that is the same key signature, and parallel keys, that is the same tonic with a different key signature. And so this brings us to the end of the material for Chapter 1. In the previous video, we covered major scales, natural minor, harmonic minor, and melodic minor scales, and the patterns of half steps and whole steps for those scales. In this video, we've covered the circle of fifths, how it's built, and how key signatures relate to one another, both from one scale to the next and also between major keys and minor keys with relative and parallel relationships. Be sure you're familiar with all this information, and we'll be working on it together in class.